The air was thick with the scent of sunscreen and chlorine, as Mark watched his wife, Jenna, unpack her suitcase in their bedroom. She had just returned from a week-long trip to Las Vegas with her closest friends. Mark, ever the devoted husband, had smiled and waved her off when she left, trusting her implicitly. But now, as she moved around the room, her energy seemed off, distracted and distant in a way he couldn't quite place. "How was Vegas?" Mark asked, trying to mask his unease with casual interest. Jenna glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "It was fun," she said, offering a faint smile. "Shopping shows, you know how it is. Too much wine, though." She gave a small laugh, one that didn't reach her eyes, before pulling her suitcase into the closet. Mark nodded but couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Their marriage had always been steady, their routines predictable in a comforting way. But the woman who stood before him now felt like a stranger. In the days that followed, Jenna's behavior shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. She was glued to her phone, laughing at messages she didn't share, and her affection toward Mark waned. Their once lively conversations dwindled to hollow exchanges. "Are you okay?" Mark asked one evening as she sat silently across from him at the dinner table. "You've been distant lately." Jenna barely looked up from her plate. "I'm fine," she said curtly. "Just tired from the trip." But Mark couldn't ignore the pit forming in his stomach. Something was wrong. He just didn't know what. A week later, Mark was in the kitchen when Jenna's phone buzzed on the counter. She was in the shower, the sound of running water masking the noise. Mark glanced at the screen and saw a text notification. "Unknown number. Hope you're feeling better today. Let me know if you want to talk." Mark's heart skipped a beat. His first instinct was to dismiss it. It could be one of her friends. But something about the tone felt off. When Jenna emerged from the bathroom, Mark decided to ask, "Who's texting you?" She froze for the briefest moment before forcing a smile. "Oh, just Stacy. She's been checking on me since the trip." Mark nodded slowly, pretending to accept her explanation, but her tone was too quick, too rehearsed. The unease gnawed at him, even as he tried to push it aside. The following Saturday, Jenna claimed she was meeting her friends for brunch. Her demeanor was lighter than it had been in weeks, but Mark couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't being truthful. After she left, his curiosity got the better of him. Mark grabbed his car keys and followed her at a safe distance. Instead of heading toward the cafe, where she claimed she'd meet her friends, Jenna drove to the medical district and parked outside a clinic. Mark's heart sank as he watched her walk inside, clutching her purse. He sat in his car for nearly an hour, replaying every odd interaction from the past few weeks. When Jenna finally emerged, she didn't notice him as she hurried back to her car. When they were home later that day, Jenna mentioned she had a yoga class in the evening. As she left, Mark's eyes landed on her purse, sitting on the kitchen counter. His hands trembled as he opened it, driven by a desperate need for answers. Inside, he found a folded piece of paper. His stomach churned as he read the words at the top. STD panel results. The date on the bill was from 2 days prior. That night, after the kids were in bed, Mark confronted her. "Jenna," he said, holding up the paper, "why did you get tested for an STD?" Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I wasn't feeling well," she finally muttered, avoiding his eyes. "I just wanted to rule out anything serious." "Rule out what?" Mark's voice rose. "Why didn't you tell me about this? What's really going on?" Tears welled in Jenna's eyes as her composure cracked. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "It was a mistake." Mark's chest tightened. "What was a mistake?" "There was a guy," Jenna admitted, her voice breaking, "at the club in Vegas. He flirted with me, and I was drunk. It didn't mean anything." Mark stared at her, his world unraveling with each word. "You cheated on me," he said, his voice hollow. "It was just one time," Jenna pleaded. "I regretted it the moment it happened." Mark's disbelief turned to fury. "And now you might have brought an STD into our marriage?" Her tears fell freely, but Mark felt nothing but rage. Mark's fury simmered through the night, refusing to let him rest. The betrayal wasn't just a single, impulsive mistake. It was a crack in the foundation of the life he had built with Jenna. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions he couldn't suppress. Was she telling the truth about it being a one-time mistake? Could he believe anything she said? The next morning, Mark decided he needed clarity. If Jenna wasn't going to give him the full truth, he'd get it himself. He picked up the phone and dialed someone he never thought he'd turn to for help. Lisa, Jenna's best friend. Lisa, he said, skipping the pleasantries. I need to know what happened in Vegas. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mark, I don't think it's my place to. Jenna cheated on me, Mark interrupted. I already know. I need the truth, Lisa. Don't lie to me. Lisa sighed heavily. It wasn't just one guy, she admitted. Jenna, she got carried away. There were multiple guys at the club. The whole trip was wild, Mark. I tried to talk her out of it, but she didn't listen. Mark's stomach churned. Multiple guys? His grip tightened on the phone as Lisa's words sank in. Jenna hadn't made a single mistake. She'd made a series of deliberate choices. Why didn't you tell me this before? Mark demanded, his voice shaking with anger. I didn't want to get involved, Lisa said softly. I'm sorry, Mark. He hung up without another word, his heart pounding. The betrayal was worse than he had imagined. That evening, Mark confronted Jenna again. This time, there was no hesitation, no tiptoeing around the truth. I talked to Lisa, he said flatly. Jenna froze, her eyes widening. What did she say? She told me everything, Mark replied, his voice cold. Multiple guys, Jenna. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice, a pattern. How could you do this to me? To our kids? Jenna's shoulders slumped, and her voice faltered. Mark, I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know what came over me. It was just, I felt trapped in our routine, and for a moment, I wanted to feel alive again. Alive? Mark spat. You destroyed everything we built because you wanted a thrill? Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, I got the test results back. I'm positive. Mark's world tilted. You're positive? He repeated, his voice trembling with disgust. Do you realize what you've done? She reached for him, but he recoiled. Don't touch me, he snapped. You're disgusting. That night, Mark packed a small bag and left the house. He drove aimlessly, his thoughts a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. By the time he reached his parents' house, he was emotionally spent. Mark's parents welcomed him with open arms, their concern evident as he recounted everything. His father, a man of few words, sat silently, his jaw tight with anger. His mother, on the other hand, wept quietly, her heart breaking for her son. You have to protect yourself and the kids, his father said finally. Jenna's made her choices. Now, you need to make yours. The next morning, Mark put his plan into action. He transferred every penny from their joint account into his personal account, ensuring Jenna wouldn't have access to any of it. Then he picked up the kids early from school, carefully explaining that they were going on a little adventure. Kate and Noah, oblivious to the turmoil, were excited as they packed their favorite toys and clothes. Mark hated the deception, but he knew it was necessary. By the time Jenna realized what had happened, they were already on the road. Her frantic messages and calls flooded Mark's phone, but he ignored them. When her persistence became unbearable, Mark pulled over at a rest stop and answered. Mark, where are the kids? Jenna demanded, her voice laced with panic. They're with me, he said calmly. What do you mean they're with you? Where are you? We're not coming back, Mark replied flatly. Her voice cracked. Mark, this isn't funny. I need to see them. They're my kids too. You gave that up when you destroyed our family, Mark said coldly. Do you think I want my children around someone who betrayed their father? Who lied and brought an STD into our marriage? You're a danger to them, Jenna. I'm doing what I have to do to protect them. Mark, please, she begged, sobbing. Don't do this. I love them. You know I love them. You didn't think about them when you were sleeping with strangers in Vegas, he shot back. Goodbye, Jenna. He hung up and turned off his phone, the weight of his decision settling heavily on his shoulders. Mark and the kids settled in a small town several hours away, where no one knew their story. He focused on creating a stable, loving environment for Kate and Noah, shielding them from the chaos Jenna had caused. At night, after the kids were asleep, Mark allowed himself to feel the full weight of his emotions. He oscillated between anger, sadness, and a hollow sense of loss. But as the weeks turned into months, he began to find a sense of peace. Mark started seeing a therapist, someone who helped him process the betrayal and rediscover his sense of self-worth. He poured his energy into his children, his work, and rebuilding his life. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to come together. Months passed, and Mark's new life began to take shape. He found a small house in a quiet neighborhood, far from the chaos of his old life. He enrolled Kate and Noah in a new school, where they quickly made friends and adapted to the change. Mark was determined to give them stability, to shield them from the mess Jenna had left behind. But as he settled into his new routine, the weight of the past still hung over him. Jenna's attempts to reach him continued. Her phone calls, emails, and messages came in waves, each one more desperate than the last. But Mark remained resolute. He refused to answer, refusing to allow her any more power over his life. The damage was done, and there was no going back. One evening, as Mark was tucking Noah into bed, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number. Unknown number. I know you're angry, Mark, but the kids deserve to see their mother. You can't keep them from me forever. The message sent a jolt of rage through Mark's chest. It was from Jenna, of course. Her voice, masked by the false calm of a text message, still carried that underlying manipulation. She was trying to guilt him, twist the situation in her favor. She knew exactly how to strike at his vulnerabilities. But Mark wasn't the man he used to be. He wasn't the man who had spent sleepless nights wondering how he had failed her. He wasn't the man who had blindly trusted her. Now, he was a father protecting his children from the woman who had shattered their family. His fingers hovered over the phone screen, the temptation to respond tugging at him. But instead, he deleted the message without a second thought. He didn't need to engage with her anymore. Her time was over. It wasn't just Mark who had changed. Jenna, too, was reeling from the consequences of her actions. The public fallout from her infidelity and the STD scare had cost her everything: her reputation, her career, and her standing with her friends. No one spoke to her anymore. Her social circle had disbanded, and the few people who remained tried to convince her to fight for her family. But the damage was done. Mark wasn't coming back, and the kids were not returning to her life. Jenna's desperation grew with each passing day. She began to push harder, sending long-winded, tear-filled emails to Mark, trying to manipulate him into allowing her access to their children. She even sought legal advice, threatening him with custody battles. But Mark wasn't afraid. He had done his research, and he knew the law. He had made sure to document everything: her infidelity, the lies, and the damage she had caused to their family. One day, after receiving another threatening message from Jenna's lawyer, Mark decided it was time to take action. He wasn't just going to be the passive victim anymore. He was going to make sure Jenna faced the consequences of her actions. He contacted his own lawyer and began the process of filing for full custody. His lawyer was supportive but cautious. "This isn't going to be easy," she warned. "Jenna's going to fight back. She'll try to twist everything in her favor, and custody battles can get ugly." Mark nodded grimly. "I'm prepared for it." He wasn't just fighting for the kids. He was fighting for his own dignity. He wasn't going to let Jenna continue to manipulate and destroy his life. Jenna didn't take the custody battle lying down. As Mark had predicted, she fought tooth and nail to regain some control over the situation. She hired a high-powered lawyer, someone who was notorious for using underhanded tactics. The courtroom battles were fierce, each side accusing the other of lies, manipulation, and emotional harm. But as the case dragged on, Mark became more determined. He had already endured the pain of betrayal. Now, he was willing to fight with every ounce of strength he had to protect his children. He gathered evidence, emails, messages, anything he could find to prove her negligence and betrayal. He had the truth on his side, and that truth was powerful. As the trial continued, the tension in the courtroom built to a fever pitch. Jenna's lawyer tried to paint Mark as an angry, vengeful ex-husband who was using the kids as pawns in his own revenge scheme. But every accusation was met with a carefully constructed defense. Mark remained calm, his emotions in check, knowing that the stakes were too high to lose control. Finally, After months of back and forth, the judge ruled in Mark's favor. He was awarded full custody of Kate and Noah, with Jenna receiving limited visitation rights, under strict supervision. The moment the ruling was announced, Mark felt a surge of relief. It wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring that his children were safe from the chaos Jenna had created. They deserved better than the broken woman who had betrayed him and tried to destroy their family. With the custody battle behind him, Mark focused on rebuilding his life. He continued to settle into his new home, surrounded by the laughter of his children. Kate and Noah thrived in their new environment, their lives no longer overshadowed by the tension and betrayal of the past. Mark made sure they knew they were loved, and that nothing would ever take away their happiness. As for Jenna, her attempts to regain control were futile. The legal system had spoken, and Mark had won. But the emotional toll of everything she had done left her isolated. No one in her life could look past the lies and betrayal, and even her own guilt began to eat away at her. One night, months after the trial, Mark received a text from Jenna. "Jenna, I'm sorry for everything. I know I'll never be able to fix it, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to change. I've hit rock bottom, and I'm working on myself." Mark stared at the screen for a long moment. He could have responded, could have offered some words of sympathy, but the truth was that he didn't owe her anything anymore. Instead, he placed the phone down, turned off the screen, and walked to where his children were playing in the living room. His family, the one he had fought so hard to protect, was whole again. The past was behind him. The future was his to shape. And for the first time in a long while, Mark felt free.